Hey, my name is Kostas. Thanks for coming to my talk. I'm going to talk to you today about managing an application security program using open source tools. Didn't bring a ticker, so in the way of the slides. So I'm going to skip something because of the lack of time. So if you want to hear more about me or see a demo, please come to Versado, the booth in the entrance. And that leaves the following three topics that I want to cover. One is, what is the role of open source software in security, information security? Second, what is an appsec program and how to manage it? Third, I want to showcase a particular open source project called Voxxed Dojo that can help you manage your application security program. So I'm going to skip over the introduction and go straight to free and open source software. I'm sure many of you use it. It's amazing. I use it. I use this kind of software every day in my life. As an example of how much value it has, the Apache Software Foundation estimates that the total value of their work in 1 year has been $20 billion, and they've got like 600 million worth of code that they give away for free. So it's like a free lunch. People say it doesn't exist, but how do they explain open source then? So free lunch is great, but it's also important that free lunch is fresh and you don't leave it out for days, because then it might be dangerous to eat. Right? So we give away the fruits of our labor, and we enjoy all the software that we love for free, but sometimes we've got to make sure that they're not dangers lurking inside, like something rotten, whether by accident or even by personal purpose. That's what happened back in 2016. If you remember, Equifax, a big credit rating company in the United States, was hacked, and 50 million people lost their personal financial information in there. And this webpage was powered by a vulnerability in the Apache Struts library. That's a popular, or was popular, I don't know these days, web framework, right? So the tragic thing about that incident was that the bug was fixed in March of that year, but the vulnerability happened in May, and there were 2 months during that period where 143 million US consumers and another few more million people in the rest of the world could have been saved a lot of trouble. So they estimate that until today it's $2 billion in damages from forgetting to update one library in one application. So you don't want that to happen to you, I know. Does anyone here have an application security program in where they work? Raise your hand. See, one person, two people, three people, four. Okay. So the rest of you, I mean, sorry to say, you're flying blind, and this could happen to you. Maybe you wouldn't have, that big a company to worry about billions of dollars, but it still could be difficult. And your customers also don't want it to happen to them, and governments also. So you'll find maybe at some point during your growth, during your evolution, that you'll have to comply with rules and regulations and laws, including the famous GDPR, but many more that sometimes are even mandatory. You can't do business without them. So you need to do better. And there are, of course, many vendors, many proprietary solutions to help you do better, but there are also open source solutions to do better. So let's talk a bit more about that. So what is application security and what is an appsec program? So application security is very big because there's privacy, there's integrity, confidentiality. There are various dimensions, and we can't go into them all in this short talk. But everyone can benefit from an application security program that covers certain basic things. And I want to I want to tell you what I think an application security program is fundamentally. And I believe that fundamentally it's about two things. It's about culture and procedures. So you can't have one without the other. We need procedures. Like I mentioned, some of them are legally mandated, but procedures can't help unless there's also a culture and that sustains these procedures and makes people follow them. So that said, I want to ask another question to the audience. Is anyone here not aware and cannot be certain if their software has an outdated, vulnerable third-party library running inside it right now? Is there anyone who can be sure? No? Okay, one person. But of course, you're only talking about known vulnerabilities, right? You might have something that's unknown, and then so basically, we all might be vulnerable right now, and that's kind of a cultural mind shift that we need to have in starting our journey with an application security program. So we know we're vulnerable, we just don't know how, and we need to find out how. So let's look at some of the elements that go into an appsec program. So first, training is important because training is one of the ways, first of all, we build culture and also make people, empower people to follow the procedures that are going to be put in place. And this is not an exhaustive list, right? There's much more here, but we won't go into it. After training, I think the most fundamental thing you want to do is you want to test your software. So application security testing. And we'll talk a bit more about that. Then there's something called software composition analysis that goes by many names. Some people call it supply chain management, which is annoying because it's confusing with logistics and other industries. And also, we should give a shout out to pen testing. And let me go into a bit more detail about all that. So, training is both about how to write software that's secure, but also understanding the impact of vulnerabilities. So when you're writing software and you think, hey, I don't need authentication, you might think that's reasonable, but then once you become aware of all the trouble that might cause, even for an internal app, you might think twice and think, well, I'll spend some time and I'll add a basic authentication. That's a matter of a mentality, and training is important. So the OWASP Top 10 is a very good starting point. If you're not aware of any training material that's available to you, you can just go to the Organization for Web Application Security and look at the top 10 list of things that you should care about. So talking about testing, we have a few kinds of testing, and we'll only talk about two. One is static application security testing, and that's when you use some kind of software that reads your source code or any other artifacts that are produced by during the course of building your system. So these tools, these static testing tools, will read your artifacts, and it'll give you a report of all the problems they found, things that are easily detectable, like for example, a lack of sanitization on a variable that's input by the user. You want tools can detect that automatically the moment you're writing them, even on your IDE, but also in CI/CD. It's always best to run these things in CI/CD so that your developers get early feedback before they, even send their application for a code review. And there are so many tools you can use for this. At Versata, we have some that are suited for our use cases. Some are platform specific, like Brakeman. Other more general, like SonarQube and Trivi. But if you go to, again, the OWASP website, you'll find like at least 52 free and open source tools that cover pretty much the most common use cases around static application security testing. So then we'll talk about dynamic application security testing, which is kind of black box testing, where you want to run a test on your application after it's been deployed on the outside and see if it has any vulnerabilities. For example, cross-site scripting or SQL injection, where you're not sanitizing again data and it ends up in your database when it shouldn't. So some tools that we use at Persado are Wasp Z-Attack Proxy and OpenBAS. But there are, again, many to choose from, at least 20 listed on the OWASP website that might work better for you. And after talking about testing, let's talk a bit about the software composition analysis, which is fancy words for just knowing what your dependencies are and if they've been updated and if they're vulnerable. So this is, again, something you can do in CI/CD, but it's not enough to do in CI/CD. You should do it periodically because you might have deployed a version to production yesterday and there wasn't any known vulnerabilities in your dependencies, but you should test again today because today there might be some new vulnerabilities released by researchers. So don't forget to do that. Yeah, I won't repeat. Going to owasp.org for more good software. These are some of the tools that we use. And Dependabot is interesting as well because you might have seen it in many open source projects themselves. It helps you, it automatically gives you a merge request or a pull request for an outdated dependency. Finding out if you're vulnerable is important, but it's also a bit too late. So when you're doing software composition analysis, it helps to do take proactive measures, such as having golden repositories. Maybe you have, for example, a Java Maven repository, that everything inside there is pre-vetted, pre-approved by your security team. And there are new approaches to the software composition analysis that I want to shout out, although I personally don't have that much experience with it. One is cryptographic verification of your dependencies, a project called SigStore, for example, and SBOMs, which are software bill of materials. I won't talk about them, but there's a talk later today by Steve Poole and Olympiu, P.O.P., I don't know that name, that talks about SBOMs, and that's very exciting, I think, in this area. So, last but not least, pen testing, which, in case you were wondering, is not about making sure your pens work. Pen testing is about it's called penetration testing in the long form. And that is when you get someone, usually a professional, to try and break your system. So they're trying to act like a malicious user, like a hacker. And this is something that you can do maybe once or twice a year. I think that's pretty common. If you can't afford a professional pen tester, you can get some of your colleagues to play pen tester with some free tools like Kali Linux. But that's all good and well. But how do we manage all this work? It seems like a lot of work, right? So one of the workflows that you might think of adopting, a kind of simple workflow, is, okay, I'm going to run some tests, I'm going to collect the findings, I'm going to prioritize the findings according to which ones I think are more dangerous, more important, and then I'm going to start working on solving the problem, mitigation, in other words. Ideally we'll fix them all, right? But it's not that easy. I mean, first, it really is a lot of work. It takes so much time to go through all these reports and all these findings. And especially if you don't have all the knowledge that some of those professionals in the area have, it might be difficult to even do it all. And there are lots of false positives. That means that your tools will report things as problems, and in the end, they were not problems. So you're maybe wasting time by looking at them. So yeah, that's true and well, but there's things that you can do to help both manage the workload and coordinate with all the various teams, because you have to work with your colleagues on all these. And Persado, like a lot of companies until recently, was basically just using Excel. We had Excel sheets listing all the problems that had been found, tagging people who needed to fix them and trying to keep track of it all. But it was not going very well at all. We were constantly being left behind. So what are some solutions to doing this better? I'm going to talk about three, although I'm already over time. I'm almost done. I hope I can go through them quickly. One is during your application lifecycle, design to monitoring, you don't want to start too late. So you want to start all these things much earlier during the process. This means there's more time, and the load is spread out. But also, the earlier you find a problem, the cheaper it is to fix. The second is automation. So most of these tests can be run in CI/CD automatically, but you can also use APIs, API-enabled tools to do some of the other stuff in your workflow automatically. Even, like we said, would depend on automatically fixing the problems. And in that respect, I wanted to talk about OWASP Defect Dojo, which is a great project, a great open source project that will do a lot of these things for you. It can be your source of truth for all the vulnerability programs, also an inventory for all your products and apps, something usually mandated by a lot of compliance rules. And it can help you orchestrate some of the workflows, such as deduplication, integrating with other tools, and give you the opportunity to do custom things through an API. These are some screenshots of the dashboards of the product-specific displays, and tests. Here you can see some test results or two findings. And the feature list is really big. I can't get into it now. Just want to highlight that there are about 140 different tools that are supported for importing findings into Defect Dojo. So whatever you use or whatever you want to use is probably here. Free, open source, or proprietary. Also, I wanted to highlight that OWASP Defect Dojo can deal with false positives efficiently. So it can also maintain a history, and you don't have to mark the same thing as a false positive again and again. But it can also deduplicate findings, and that allows you to organize things much easier. And it's very easy to deploy, so it's just a Python app. You can run it in Kubernetes or in Docker. There's also an installer if you want to go that way. It might need some resources, so RAM, CPU, more than you'd expect. Especially deduplicating takes a lot. And although there's no warranty like open source, there are some companies offering commercial support. And I hear they're working on a prettier UI. So we use Defect Dojo at Prasada today. We run our tests in GitLab CI. We upload the results to Defect Dojo. It automatically opens Jira, track issues and projects, and tracks the status and SLA, and also does updates. So bidirectionally, we're all on the same page about when something will be fixed, or even if we're going to fix it at all. So I'm a bit over time. Thank you for your patience. Please come by our booth. We can get to know each other, and I can do a short demo of Defect Dojo if you're interested.